Hello and welcome to another episode of Aware It's Football. Today we have our first ever panel discussion, not a debate, Wade, not a debate, Wade. So we're going to try to keep this calm and still and just talk footy ball and knowledge. And today we're talking about the trajectory of the modern football, or the modern game, sorry. I think it's over the last 5 to 10 years it's been interesting. Some of the greatest players of all times are finally reaching a penultimate, if not the ultimate phase of their careers. New managers at the helm and at the peak of their own careers, a lot of the different young players coming up through the ranks, a lot of different power dynamics are going on, and I think it's an interesting topic that we want to just bring up and just give a bit of nuance to. Going first to my counterpart on the end of the table, Wade. What do you think of the modern football, or the modern game, bro?
So I think, just a quick elaboration is that, if you look at football, let's say the period that we most likely watched it, 2013 to 2018, it's fair to say that we've been blessed to witness arguably one of the best generations, if not the best. I mean, we saw the two greatest footballers go head to head, Messi and Ronaldo, Real Madrid, Barcelona, one of the greatest El Clasico periods. But when we speak of this transition and trajectory into the modern game, we're going to start off with this little discussion on players and managers. And when you look at and juxtapose now versus then, do you still see that same sort of player rivalry like we saw with Kane versus Vieira, a storied rivalry amongst the players? And do you still see that sort of post-match anger amongst the players? I saw when Chelsea knocked out Real Madrid, Eden Hazard is sitting there cracking jokes with Antonio Rudiger after the match. You see Solskjaer as a manager smiling in press conferences after getting walloped. Do you still see that fiery intensity, like that Wenger versus Mourinho rivalry? I remember a very distinct interview, and I'm looking at players and managers now, where someone posed a question to Mourinho saying, you're feeling the pressure just after you won the Carling Cup and is he going to win the league? He says, no, I don't feel any pressure. Sir Alex Ferguson is the only European champion. Which are the European champions in here? Do you still see that taking on of the media by a manager, these kind of big personalities in football? And also when you look at players themselves, I know for me, I look at the current youth, and I don't think they're as good as people make it out to be. I remember, and I said it before off air, a 22-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo signs for Real Madrid at 80 million, having won the Champions League, PFA Player of the Year, Ballon d'Or, FIFA World Player of the Year. United go and drop 73 million, or however much the figure is, on Jadon Sancho, who quite frankly hasn't accomplished anything to that level. So do you still see, there's a sort of, for me, I know, I'm disinterested in the modern game. Players aren't up to that level that I saw. Player rivalries, managerial rivalries, that same level and intensity. And also some of the things that come out of managers' mouths. Nagelsmann wanting to have microphones like this is the NFL with the quarterback. I don't want to see that in the modern game. So, I just want to pose it to the panel now. Player quality, player rivalries, managers, let's hear your takes on this. Is it the same as it was that 2013, 2018? Are we heading into a new era that's just, quite frankly, not as intense as the game that we once watched? Let's start with Justin.
No, not at all, bro. I definitely agree with you. Especially when it comes to, we'll start it off simple, the player rivalries. We don't see that Keane, that Vieira, the animosity in the tunnel before a game. You walk up, and I'll be biased and keep it on with the Man United team. You walk up to a Man United starting level and you in the tunnel with them, shoulder to shoulder. There's no intimidation going on. Nothing. It's
especially at United. Sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely,
right now.
Definitely. There's nothing of the sort. There's no character. Roy Keane keeps on saying this. There's no character in almost every single team. You have to if you're looking out of the Premier League, there's more characters in La Liga and Serie A as well, and maybe even the Bundesliga, players that can really take hold of a team and hold everyone accountable to their actions on and off the pitch. Yeah, at United or Premier League in general, it seems like the media runs it now. Players have become soft. It's.
Nick, let's hear your view.
I miss players like Keane, like Gattuso, those pit bulls on the pitch. Those guys that were gonna break you first, ask questions later.
And rather break themselves to win a game.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So bleed. We were talking about earlier with the paddle wars. We were talking about Rio versus Vidic, and Vidic was that player for us. That I'm ball and all. I'm gonna take you with me and everybody. And just to win a game. You look at the likes of Maguire. You look at even John Stones, for example. it's too soft for me. Like,
Why?
but also the VAR has taken it away from the game as well, because players are scared to go in hard. Because you're going too hard, slightly dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, those kind of tackles you got up with it, you know? Now you're getting sent off for tackles like that. So I think the modernization of the game has its advantages in terms of making the right call, I suppose. Doesn't happen
It's
enough,
taking a lot
in
to
my
it.
opinion.
Yeah.
But it's taking more, I think, because
Yeah.
the game is about passion, it's about hunger, it's about drive, it's about determination. And you don't see that in the modern day footballer, you know? Like, I'm going to leave everything on the field. And then if we lose, it's okay. And I've said it about United a couple of times. The idea that if we were playing well or putting everything into it and still losing,
Then I could also
I'm happy.
understand as a fan. Yeah,
I'm happy. But now you go and then always just like, oh,
Hey.
Right, let's get your view on this.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with a lot of what you said, you know. I don't know, I just think it's where football is at the moment and the world, you know. I know that sounds like off topic, but it literally is what it is. In terms of players being bought for similar amounts of that of Ronaldo, let's use the Sancho and Ronaldo example. Sancho's nowhere compared to Ronaldo at that point, like when we bought Ronaldo, sold Ronaldo to Madrid, right? So my thing is, that's due to now external facets at play that affects the footballing world. You know what I mean? Inflation,
Yes,
or
definitely,
just
definitely.
yeah. So to say, I know it's difficult to watch where football is at the moment and the different things that are happening that aren't so good, but is that not inevitable? You know
But
what I'm
then you see,
saying?
let's pose it to like this.
Evolution,
If we look,
yeah.
if we look at the players that you look at, let's look at the group of youngsters you have. Frankie
No,
de Jong,
sorry. On
De
that
Ligt.
regard, I can agree. There's a whole mentality shift from when football was rugged and tough to where we are now.
Now I'm
it's-
talking about caliber and quality
Oh,
as well.
quality,
If you look at Frankie de Jong, Rashford, De Ligt, these would be the players that we saw grow into that. Ronaldo, Messi, Rooney.
Yeah.
You know, do you still think that these players that we've seen come are at that caliber and
That's
quality?
also media control now, because the media hypes these players up and they're not as good as...
Exactly, so they're not
It's
as
all the
good.
media.
You know, it's not even just the mentality, but the
Yeah.
caliber and quality that we've seen from them. Are they here today and gone tomorrow?
Fair enough. Okay, look, caliber and quality, you see now different, also the times in football. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to explain what I'm trying to get across, but that time of period in football where we were watching these O's come up, you know, the time of our lives to where we are now, I can tell you, I still enjoy watching football in this period of time because we're seeing so many different players come in, etc., etc. They may not be reminiscent of the old players from back then, but fuck it, I like seeing the likes of Diaby who got called up to France. Do you know what I'm saying? I like seeing Mecha, who played for City, who was now brought into Belgium.
Yes, yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? So when we're talking caliber and quality, it's difficult to boil down to a proper explanation because it's different time periods. That's how
just to comment on that, you know, when you look at the likes of the players, particularly in the Premier League, that have been hyped up as teenagers, and just the comparison between Greenwood and Foden.
Yeah.
Foden is probably the only player at his age that's as good as he is.
Really, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't
So
agree
for
more.
me, there are those players that are as good as the players that were back then. Like if you look at Rooney,
At that time of the
compared,
age,
if you look at Rooney compared to Foden, I think just in terms of decision making, technical ability,
Okay.
there are players that match up. But the hype
fun.
behind them is the problem.
It's difficult.
So you hype up players that could possibly be as
The
good,
next Rooney,
but
the
they're
next
not,
Ronaldo.
and the hype probably kills the possibility.
Okay,
as well.
let's get your opinion quickly.
Now, I wanted to add on to that. My biggest issue with the media in the modern game at the moment is they cast a massive shadow of doubt over young and up and coming players that puts such heights of expectations
Yeah.
on
And
their
they're so
shoulders.
young.
And it just takes 1 or 2 games for them to not fire, and then
And
all of a
they
sudden
lashed.
The
they
whole world's
overrated
against them.
this. And then also the protection of a certain category of player, whether it be English, whether it be from this club, that club. The media's actual power in the modern game at the moment is actually it's infuriating.
Yeah.
And they didn't have that power when managers like Wenger, Ferguson, Mourinho were at their peak, Ancelotti. And I'm not saying it's only down to them, but they played a massive role and they protected their players. I'm not saying guys like Solskjaer and Tuchel and Conte don't protect their players, but do they do enough, or to that certain extent? And these young players should be guarded.
They should be.
But when I say guarded, I don't mean they shouldn't be thrown out there, because if they have the ability, they're old enough for me. And that's the way it's a United philosophy to say, talk to my biases. But it's a problem for me, and then obviously then we go, as soon as there's that shadow of doubt gets casted, then it's overrated, or suddenly he's underrated. And that's also comes down to another issue with modern football is it's so robotic, it's so controlled, it's so scripted. Guys like Mourinho is a prime example. I mean, the way he handled the media, the way he handled his, obviously not social media, the way he handled his social presence, it was captivating, and it actually brought attention to the Premier League as well as everywhere else he went, including the Liga, and it's the same with Guardiola.
Now,
But I just want to finish my point, sorry for interrupting you, but the robotic nature of how players respond on social media, having social media teams to handle these issues.
you saw Bruno's error recently where he posted the Arsenal training session.
And it's something like Roy Keane touches on a lot in his analyses is there's no emotion.
Yeah.
It's not like weight.
They're
It's
taking
not
passion
as
away
raw
from-
as it used
Yeah,
to
they're
be.
taking passion away from
And
football.
I'm not as negative. I'll still watch football. I still think modern football is good enough, and it is captivating enough purely because of the drama and the technical elements that are coming to play. But it is not what it used to be.
It isn't.
If we're being honest.
Now, on to the next one. Now, the next one we're going to do it twofold. Now, these are some of the external factors that particularly disinterest me in the modern game. The first being finances, and just to touch on it so I have an idea of where the topic is going, is that let's say we look at the Premier League as an example. Man City recently spent 100 million on Jack Grealish. Now, there's a problem that comes in the modern game, particularly in domestic leagues. When you're spending, as a top-tier team that can afford it, 100 million on a domestic talent, it kind of creates a push and pull between the top and the bottom. Because then you'll find that your lower-end Premier League teams won't be able to not just compete for foreign players, but they won't be able to get the domestic talent unless it comes through the academy. And you're starting to see now how finances is infiltrating football, where players are more frequently having 1 billion buyout clauses. They're getting players that are coming in with price tags that are undeserved, like Harry Maguire at 80 million. And now you're looking at not just finances, but the second part of the segment, which really disinterests me, is tournament structures. UEFA has been canvassed as the savior of football because they're one of the major stakeholders and purporters against the Super League. But realistically, UEFA is heading football towards the commercialization of football. Was there a need for UEFA Conference League? Is there a need for UEFA Nations League? They're putting more and more tournaments out there to get more and more financial input out of there. And now you look at guys like the technical directors of FIFA like Wenger, where FIFA poses the question to them, hey listen, we need an idea of how are we going to have more frequent World Cups. So that Wenger's now this architect of a World Cup every 2 years. You got a World Cup every 2 years. You got more frequent tournaments by UEFA. You got finances in football, where I actually think they need to adopt an NBA approach in this regard, the NBA approach. Salary caps and financial, purchasing caps. Otherwise, you're going to have salaries that will soon venture to £750,000 a week for players, and it's just going to become a game of finances more than what. Exactly. So I want to pose it back to John now. Let's hear your take on these twofold things.
I want to start in a contrary opinion that might be a bit unpopular. I'm not a fan of the current state of finances in the modern game, but at the same time, to oppose that, what I do like about how expensive certain players are from certain clubs, from certain leagues, is it brings a lot of power back into smaller clubs. Because obviously clubs now are now fully aware and are fully taking advantage of the fact that they can charge this set amount for a certain young player that's obviously being sought after by the bigger clubs. Because it's the same. Jack Grealish going from Aston Villa to Man City, 100 million. This English tax of the top English teams buying players from other English clubs for unbelievable and ridiculous prices. The only thing I like about it is the fact that it puts a certain amount of power back into smaller clubs' hands who need the financial weight. But at the same time, I agree. The inflation on players. I mean, Ousmane Dembele, how much did he go for? 160 or something like that. I feel sorry for the boy. He's played with injuries, but that's an insane transfer coming from Germany to Barcelona for that amount of money. It just doesn't sit right with me. And
that's also not the player's fault. That goes again. It's down to the club, down to the president, how the clubs run, and the agents.
The agents they can be sus.
Oh, agent
They are sus.